The alien ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning. They were massive, gleaming things that hung in the sky like silver mountains. People stopped on streets and stared upward. Cars pulled over. Parents grabbed their children. For 3 hours, the world held its breath and waited. Then the message came. Not an invasion, a plea for help. Commander Vectar stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall 2 days later. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with blue-gray skin and 3 fingers on each hand. His voice came through a translation device that made it sound oddly flat and mechanical. "We are the Galactic Coalition," he said. "For 300 of your years, we have fought an enemy called the Crithian Swarm. They consume everything. Every world they touch becomes dead rock. Every species they encounter is either enslaved or destroyed." He showed them images on a holographic display. Worlds burning, cities crushed under massive insect-like creatures, beings that looked almost human running and screaming as the swarm descended. "We are losing," Vectar continued. His eyes, large and dark, looked tired. "Our armies grow smaller. Our worlds fall one by one. We have searched the galaxy for allies, for anyone who can help us survive. And we found you." General Patricia Hayes sat in the front row, her gray hair pulled back tight. She was 63 years old and had fought in 3 wars. Next to her sat Admiral John Carter, younger but with the same hard look in his eyes. They watched the aliens' presentation without speaking. Vectar explained their situation. The coalition had 12 member species. They had millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, and technology far beyond Earth's, but they were dying anyway. The Crithians just kept coming, wave after wave, year after year. "We need soldiers," Vectar said simply. "Fresh troops. New fighters. You are a young species, but our scans show you understand warfare. Your history is full of conflict. You know how to fight." The assembly erupted in discussion. Some delegates argued for helping. Others said Earth should stay out of alien wars. A few worried it was a trick. General Hayes asked for a recess. She and Admiral Carter gathered with other military leaders in a private room. They reviewed everything the coalition had shared. Combat footage, tactical reports, battle statistics. "They're fighting with one hand tied behind their backs," Carter said, scrolling through a battle record. "Look at this. The Crithians overrun a defensive position. The coalition has orbital superiority. They could have glassed the entire area. Instead, they use precision strikes, try to minimize damage." "Rules of engagement," Hayes muttered. She pulled up another file. "They have actual conventions of warfare with the Crithians. Agreements about what weapons can be used where. Protected zones. Civilian areas. The Crithians ignore all of it," another general added. "Every single agreement. They use banned weapons. They target civilians deliberately, but the coalition still follows their rules." Hayes leaned back in her chair. She had seen this before in a different way. Enemies who fought without limits while others tried to stay civilized. It never ended well for the civilized ones. "They don't know how to fight total war," she said quietly. "They've never had to. All their conflicts have been limited, controlled. They fight to win territory or resources or political points. They don't fight to destroy." Carter nodded slowly. "And the Crithians do. So the coalition is looking for more soldiers who fight by their rules," Hayes continued. "More bodies to throw at the problem. They think numbers will make the difference." "Will it?" someone asked. Hayes looked at the combat footage again. Crithian warriors tearing through coalition lines. Swarm ships overwhelming defensive fleets through sheer numbers. Coalition soldiers dying because they hesitated, because they followed protocols designed for a different kind of war. "No," she said. "More soldiers won't help. They need someone who understands what kind of fight this really is." 3 days later, Earth's answer was delivered. Yes, they would help. They would send military forces to aid the coalition. Commander Vectar was relieved and grateful. He asked how many divisions Earth could contribute. "We're sending the 1st Expeditionary Strike Force," Hayes told him. 5,000 personnel. 20 warships. Vectar's face fell. He had hoped for more. Hundreds of thousands more. 5,000 seemed like nothing. "That seems quite small for a planetary commitment," he said carefully, trying not to offend. "It's enough," Hayes replied. She didn't explain. Couldn't explain, really. How could she tell him that Earth wasn't sending regular soldiers? That the ESF was something different entirely? Colonel Nathan Price received his orders at a base in Colorado. He was 47 years old with graying hair and eyes that looked like ice. He had fought in wars across 3 continents. He had done things that gave him nightmares. Things that needed doing anyway. The aliens want soldiers, General Hayes told him in a private briefing. We're sending you instead. They understand the difference? Price asked. They will. Price selected his people carefully. Major Lisa Grant became his second in command. She was brilliant, ruthless, and completely unsentimental about warfare. Captain Jake Morrison, a pilot who had survived 6 tours and never lost a wingman through lack of aggression. Lieutenant Amy Brooks, who understood that intelligence gathering meant doing whatever it took to get information. Sergeant Vincent Cole, a man who had cleared buildings full of enemies and never lost sleep over it. 5,000 people, all chosen for the same reason. They understood that some fights don't end with peace treaties. Some enemies don't surrender. Some threats need to be erased completely. The ESS Vengeance was Earth's gift to the mission. She was big, ugly, and built for one purpose only. Every weapon system was designed for maximum damage. Her armor was thick. Her engines were powerful. She carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. Coalition observers who saw her called her brutal and inelegant. They were right. She wasn't meant to look good. She was meant to kill. Price walked through the ship's corridors on departure day. His soldiers were preparing, checking weapons and equipment. They were quiet, professional. No bravado, no excitement, just focus. Major Grant found him on the observation deck. Earth hung below them, blue and green and beautiful. Think they know what they're asking for? She asked. Price watched their homeworld shrink as the ship moved away. No, they think they're getting reinforcements. More troops to plug holes in their lines. And we're not that. No, we're not. Price turned from the window. They're fighting a war they don't understand. An enemy that won't stop. That can't be negotiated with or contained. The Crithians are a threat to everyone, everywhere. That kind of threat doesn't get defeated. It gets eliminated. Grant nodded. She understood. They all did. It was why they were chosen. The Vengeance jumped to faster-than-light travel, following coordinates provided by the Coalition. The journey would take 3 weeks. Price used the time to prepare his people, to make sure they understood the mission. This wasn't peacekeeping. This wasn't fighting for territory or politics. This was extermination. The Crithians had proven they couldn't coexist with other species. They had to be removed, completely and permanently. Some of the Coalition would call it genocide. Price called it survival. The Vengeance dropped out of FTL at the edge of Coalition space. A small fleet of alien ships waited to escort them. Commander Vectar's face appeared on the communication screen. Welcome, human allies, he said. We are grateful for your assistance. Price looked at the alien commander's hopeful expression. He felt something close to pity. These people had no idea what was coming. They thought they were getting help. They were. Just not the kind they expected. Happy to help, Price said simply. The Vengeance moved deeper into Coalition territory, toward the war zone, toward the Crithians, toward the bloody work that needed doing. Behind them, Earth continued spinning peacefully, unaware of what its children were about to do in the darkness between stars. The Coalition fleet looked impressive from the outside. Hundreds of ships arranged in perfect formations, their hulls polished and gleaming. They moved with precision through space, each vessel in its assigned position. It looked orderly. Professional, safe. Price hated it immediately. They're grouped too tight, Major Grant said from beside him on the bridge. One good strike could take out 20 ships. They've never fought an enemy that would try, Price replied. He watched the tactical display as the Vengeance moved through the fleet. Coalition vessels gave them a wide berth, as if afraid to get too close to the ugly human warship. Commander Vectar invited the human leadership to his flagship for a briefing. The Coalition command ship was enormous, with corridors wide enough to drive trucks through. Everything was clean and bright. Art hung on walls. The officers wore uniforms that looked more decorative than practical. The briefing room held 20 Coalition commanders from different species. Some looked almost human. Others were completely alien. All of them stared at the humans with barely concealed curiosity. We are pleased you have arrived, Vectar began. The Crithians have been pushing hard in this sector. We have lost 3 stations in the past month. However, we have a plan to retake Station Praxis 9. It is a mining facility of strategic importance. He brought up a hologram of the station. It was large, spinning slowly in orbit around a dead moon. Red markers indicated Crithian positions. We will conduct a 3-phase assault, Vectar continued. Phase 1 involves suppression fire on their defensive positions. Phase 2 is a boarding action through these 3 airlocks. Phase 3 is room-by-room clearing, with care taken to preserve the station's infrastructure. Coalition commanders nodded. They had done this before. It was standard procedure. Price raised his hand. The room went quiet. Are there any civilians on the station? Coalition personnel? Prisoners? Vector checked his data. No. It was fully evacuated before the Crithians took it. There are only enemy forces present now. How many Crithians? Our estimates suggest between 500 and 800. Price looked at Major Grant. She looked back. Something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. We'll handle it, Price said. Vector seemed pleased. Excellent. We can provide support ships for your boarding parties and... No boarding parties, Price interrupted. We'll handle it from the Vengeance. The room erupted. Coalition commanders spoke over each other in a dozen languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up. Words like impossible and impractical and wasteful filtered through. Commander Zelix, a tall being with 4 arms and red skin, stood up. Colonel Price, perhaps you do not understand. The station must be retaken intact. Its mining equipment alone is worth billions of credits. The docking facilities are vital for fleet operations in this region. I understand, Price said calmly. You want the station? The Crithians are on the station. We'll remove the Crithians, but the infrastructure will be damaged. Yes. Price pulled up his own tactical display. Here's what's going to happen. The Vengeance will take position here 3,000 kilometers out. We'll begin with precision strikes on their power systems. That blinds them. Then we target their weapons batteries. That prevents them from shooting back. Then we breach the hull in 47 places simultaneously. Grant took over. The decompression will kill approximately 70% of the Crithian forces immediately. The survivors will retreat to the core sections. We'll track them with thermal imaging and eliminate them with sustained fire. Total operation time is 90 minutes. The coalition commanders stared in shock. Vector's face had gone pale. You're going to destroy the station. We're going to kill the Crithians on the station, Price corrected. If the station survives, that's a bonus. If it doesn't, you can build a new one. This is not acceptable, Zelix said firmly. We need that facility operational. Price stood up. His 5'10" frame was smaller than most beings in the room, but something in his presence made them step back. Commander, do you want the station or do you want the Crithians dead? Both. You can't have both. Not the way you want to do it. Your plan involves sending coalition soldiers into close quarters combat with an enemy that has killed thousands of your people. You'll lose ships. You'll lose troops. And even if you succeed, the Crithians will have rigged that station with traps and explosives. You might take it, but it'll cost you. Some costs are acceptable, Vector said quietly. Not to us. Grant's voice was cold. Earth doesn't trade lives for infrastructure. We complete objectives. If you want that station more than you want those Crithians dead, then do it yourself. We'll wait. The room fell silent. The coalition commanders looked at each other uncomfortably. They had asked Earth for help. But this wasn't help. This was something else entirely. Finally, Vector spoke. Very well. You may proceed, but I must register my objection to these methods. Noted, Price said. 6 hours later, the Vengeance moved into position. Coalition ships hung back, watching from a safe distance. Price sat in the command chair, Lieutenant Brooks at the weapons station, Captain Morrison in the pilot's seat. Range? Price asked. 3,000 kilometers in holding, Morrison reported. Weapons ready? All systems green, Brooks said. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease. Targeting solutions locked. Price looked at the station on the main screen. Somewhere inside were hundreds of Crithians. They probably thought they were safe. That the coalition would follow their usual tactics. Slow, careful, predictable. They were wrong. Fire, Price ordered. The Vengeance's main guns spoke. Lance beams, bright as suns, crossed the distance in seconds. They hit the station's power core with surgical precision. The lights on the station flickered and died. Power system down, Brooks reported. They're blind. Weapons batteries next. More fire. The station's defensive guns exploded one by one. Debris scattered into space. The Crithians inside couldn't shoot back, couldn't see what was hitting them. Hull breaches now. All locations simultaneously. This was the brutal part. 47 missiles launched at once, each one targeted at a specific point on the station's hull. They hit within a second of each other. The station's atmosphere vented into space in massive plumes of frozen air. On the Coalition command ship, officers watched in horror. They could see Crithians being pulled into space, their bodies tumbling away into the void. Hundreds of them. It was over in seconds. Thermal scans, Price said. Brooks studied her displays. Remaining hostiles concentrated in the core sections. Approximately 150 signatures. Time to finish it. The Vengeance's sustained beam weapons carved through the station like a knife through paper. They targeted each thermal signature, each cluster of Crithian life signs. There was nowhere to hide. No armor thick enough. No cover sufficient. Within 20 minutes, the thermal readings went dark. Every single one, station neutralized, Brooks reported. No hostile contacts remaining. Price leaned back in his chair. Status of the station itself? Heavily damaged. Docking facilities are gone. Mining equipment is scrap. Hull integrity is compromised in multiple sections. It's repairable, but it'll take months of work. But it's no longer occupied by Crithians. Correct. Price opened a channel to Vectar's ship. Station Praxis 9 has been cleared. No enemy survivors. You can send salvage crews when ready. Vectar's face appeared on screen. He looked sick. Colonel Price, that station was worth billions. You've reduced it to debris. No, sir. The Crithians reduced it to debris when they took it. We simply removed them from said debris. The station can be rebuilt. Your soldiers cannot. We needed that facility operational. You needed those Crithians dead more. You just didn't want to admit it. Price kept his voice level. Professional. Commander, you asked for Earth's help. This is how we help. We don't trade lives for objectives. We don't sacrifice soldiers to preserve infrastructure. We eliminate threats completely and efficiently. If that's not what you wanted, you should have been more specific. The channel closed. Price looked at his crew. They showed no emotion, no regret. They had done their job exactly as trained. On the Coalition ships, the reaction was different. Officers argued. Some were outraged at the humans' brutality. Others were quietly impressed at the efficiency. A few were horrified at how easily the humans had killed so many enemies without hesitation. Lieutenant Amy Brooks saved the tactical data from the operation. Kill ratio, 5,000 Crithians per human casualty. Human casualties, 0. Time to completion, 93 minutes. Collateral damage, acceptable. By Coalition standards, it was barbaric. By human standards, it was just another day at work. That night in the Vengeance's mess hall, Sergeant Vincent Cole sat with his squad. They ate quietly, reviewing plans for the next operation. No celebration. No mourning the destroyed station. Just focus on what came next. Think they'll send us home? One soldier asked. Cole shook his head. No, they're scared of us now. But they need us more than they fear us. We'll keep killing Crithians until there are no more Crithians to kill. He was right. The Coalition was learning a hard lesson. They had asked Earth for soldiers. They got executioners instead. And executioners don't take prisoners. They don't preserve. They don't negotiate. They just eliminate the target and move on to the next one. 2 months passed. The humans fought in 17 engagements. They won all 17. The Coalition officers stopped objecting to their methods. Results were hard to argue with, but the philosophical divide grew deeper every day. It started with a supply convoy. 6 Coalition transport ships carrying food, ammunition, and medical supplies to a forward base. They were protected by 8 warships following a route that had been used safely for years. The Crithians hit them halfway through the journey. 23 swarm ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and tore into the convoy. The Coalition escorts fought back, but they were outnumbered. 2 transports were destroyed immediately. The others scattered, trying to escape. The Coalition fleet sent reinforcements, but they were 2 hours away. By the time they arrived, 4 more transports had been destroyed. Only survivors were the escort ships, damaged and limping home. Commander Vectar called an emergency meeting. His face was grave as he addressed the assembled officers, human and Coalition alike. This raid came from Outpost Kelvin 7, he explained, highlighting a location on the star map. It's a small Crithian facility recently established. We will launch a counterstrike within 48 hours. A battle group of 30 ships will destroy the outpost and secure the region. The Coalition officers nodded. Standard response. Hit them back. Show them that raids have consequences. Lieutenant Amy Brooks raised her hand. Permission to speak, Commander. Vectar looked surprised but nodded. Of course. Where did the Crithians who attacked the convoy come from originally? Before they were stationed at that outpost? I don't understand the question. Brooks stood and walked to the holographic display. The outpost is new. Where did those ships come from? Where's their main base? Their supply depot? Their command structure? Vector pulled up more data. They operate from Hive Cluster Theta 9, approximately 8 light-years from here. But that's a major facility. Heavily defended. We can't assault it with our current forces. We don't need to assault it, Brooks said. We need to cripple it. Major Grant joined her at the display. Show us their supply routes. Everything that connects that hive cluster to this region. For the next hour, Brooks and Sergeant Vincent Cole worked with Coalition intelligence officers. They mapped out the entire Crithian logistics network in the sector. Supply depots, transit stations, fuel refineries, manufacturing plants. Everything that kept the hive cluster operational. Price watched silently. He knew what his people were planning. The Coalition officers didn't. Not yet. Finally, Brooks turned to face the room. Here's what we're going to do. We're not hitting the outpost. We're hitting everything that supports it. She highlighted locations on the map. 3 hive clusters, 7 supply depots, 12 transit stations, 4 manufacturing facilities. We take them all out in a coordinated strike. The room exploded in objections. Admiral Threnax, an elderly Coalition officer with silver skin and wise eyes, stood up. Lieutenant, what you're describing is not a counterstrike. It's a campaign. It would take months to plan and execute. 14 hours, Grant corrected. We can do it in 14 hours if we move fast. That's impossible. The logistics alone are simple, Price interrupted. We split into strike teams. Each team hits multiple targets. We use our speed and firepower advantages. Hit hard, move fast, don't stop. Commander Zellick shook his head. This is madness. Those facilities, they're not just military targets. There are Crithian civilians there. Breeding centers, medical stations. There are no Crithian civilians, Grant said flatly. She pulled up intelligence data that Brooks had compiled over the past 2 months. Every single Crithian, regardless of age or designation, contributes to their war machine. Their civilians work in weapons factories. Their medical stations treat wounded soldiers and send them back to fight. Their breeding centers produce the next generation of warriors. That doesn't give us the right to— It gives us every right, Price said, his voice cutting through the argument. Commander, you're fighting a war. Not a police action. Not a border dispute. A war for survival. The Crithians want to exterminate every species in the Coalition. They've proven that over 3 centuries. You can't fight that kind of enemy with half measures. Vectar looked troubled. Colonel Price, the Coalition has rules. Conventions of warfare. We have agreed upon limits. With an enemy that ignores every single one of them, Brooks interrupted. Commander, I've reviewed 300 years of your conflict history. The Crithians have never honored a single agreement. They use banned weapons. They target civilians deliberately. They torture prisoners, but you keep following rules they laugh at. The room fell silent. It was the truth, and everyone knew it. The Coalition had tried to fight honorably. The Crithians had no honor. What you're proposing, Admiral Threnax said slowly, it violates 17 conventions of warfare. It would make us no better than them. Price stood up. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard every word. Admiral, we're not here to make you feel good about yourselves. We're here to win. Your conventions exist because you've always fought enemies who shared your values, who wanted the same things you did. Land, resources, political power. You fought wars that could end in treaties. He pointed at the star map. The Crithians don't want treaties. They want you extinct. All of you. Every species in the Coalition erased from existence. You can't negotiate with that. You can't contain it. You can only destroy it completely. So we become destroyers ourselves? Vector asked. We abandon everything we believe in? You survive, Grant said. That's what matters. You asked Earth for help. We're helping, just not the way you wanted. The debate continued for another hour. Some Coalition officers argued for the human plan. Others insisted on following traditional protocols. In the end, Vectar made the decision. We will proceed with the operation, but I want it noted in the official record that I have serious reservations about these tactics. Noted, Price said. The strike began 12 hours later. The Vengeance led 3 task forces, each targeting a different section of the Crithian supply network. Captain Jake Morrison commanded a fighter wing that hit the transit stations. Lieutenant Brooks directed long-range missile strikes on the supply depots. Sergeant Cole took a team of special operators to sabotage the manufacturing facilities from within. The Crithians never saw it coming. They were used to coalition attacks being predictable, slow, announced. The humans gave no warning. They hit with overwhelming force and moved to the next target before the enemy could respond. Hive Cluster Theta 9 was the primary target. Price took the Vengeance in personally. The cluster was massive, 3 interconnected stations housing over 50,000 Crithians. It was their main base in the sector, their command center, their logistics hub. Price cut off every supply line leading to it. The transit stations that connected it to the rest of their empire were destroyed. The supply depots that fed it were reduced to debris. The manufacturing plants that equipped it were turned to slag. Then he waited. Not long, just 6 hours. Long enough for the Crithians in the Hive Cluster to realize they were isolated. Cut off, alone. When the Vengeance attacked, the Crithians fought desperately. They knew what was coming. Their ships poured out of the cluster, trying to break through, trying to escape. None of them made it. Morrison's fighters cut them down. Brooks's missiles found every vessel that tried to run. The Vengeance's main guns carved through their defensive positions like they were made of paper. The Hive Cluster itself lasted longer. Its shields were strong. Its weapons were powerful. But the humans had time and ammunition. They poured fire into it for 3 solid hours. No breaks, no mercy. Just sustained, relentless destruction. When the shields finally failed, Price gave one order. Finish it. The cluster broke apart in a series of explosions that lit up the sector. 50,000 Crithians died in less than 10 minutes. The debris field would remain visible for years. On the Coalition command ship, officers watched in stunned silence. Some looked horrified. Others looked sick. A few looked satisfied, though they wouldn't admit it. Young Sub-Commander Prenyi, a Coalition officer who had lost her family to the Crithians, approached Admiral Threnax. "Sir, is this really necessary? We destroyed so much. So many lives." Threnax's face was pale. "The humans call it total war. The complete destruction of an enemy's ability to fight. We've read about it in their history. We just never thought we'd see it in practice. It's monstrous. It's effective." Across the sector, the other strike teams reported in. All targets destroyed. All objectives achieved. Coalition casualties, 0. Human casualties, 3 wounded, none seriously. The Crithians in that entire region were cut off, starving and desperate. Without supplies, without reinforcements, without hope. They would either retreat or die in place. Either way, they were no longer a threat. Price stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the tactical display as it updated. Green markers replaced red ones. Entire sections of Crithian-controlled space turned neutral as enemy forces withdrew or were eliminated. "Sir," Morrison said quietly. "Message from Commander Vector. He's requesting a meeting. Tell him we'll be there in 2 hours." Grant stepped up beside Price. "Think they'll ask us to leave?" "Maybe, probably not. They're too close to winning now." 6 months into the campaign, everything had changed. The war that had dragged on for 3 centuries was suddenly winnable. The Crithians were retreating on all fronts. Their supply lines were shattered. Their forward bases were gone. For the first time in living memory, Coalition worlds were safe. But victory came with a price nobody had expected to pay. The change happened slowly. Coalition soldiers who fought alongside humans started adopting their tactics. They stopped hesitating. They stopped trying to minimize casualties. They learned to shoot first and ask questions never. Mercy became a weakness they couldn't afford. Commander Vector noticed it first. His own officers, beings who had once quoted conventions of warfare, now spoke in cold calculations. Target elimination, acceptable losses, maximum efficiency. They sounded like the humans. He called a meeting with Price, just the 2 of them. "No staff, no witnesses. What have you done to us?" Vector asked. They stood in an observation room, watching Coalition ships practice maneuvers. Aggressive maneuvers. Attack patterns the humans had taught them. "We're winning your war," Price replied simply. "At what cost? Look at them. Those are my people out there. 6 months ago, they believed in honor, in protecting life when possible, in fighting with restraint. 6 months ago you were losing. Vektar's hands trembled. We've become something we don't recognize. Our soldiers execute prisoners now. Our ships fire on targets without confirming if they're military. We've adopted your doctrine of total warfare and it's changing us. Price watched the ships through the window. He had seen this before. Civilized people forced to become uncivilized to survive. It never sat easy with them. Commander, you asked for our help. We gave it. But you can't adopt our methods halfway. You either fight to win completely or you don't fight at all. There's no middle ground against an enemy like the Crithians. I know, Vektar said quietly. That's what terrifies me. The terror became real when Coalition intelligence located a Crithian breeding world. The entire planet dedicated to producing the next generation of swarm warriors. Billions of Crithians, most of them young, being raised and trained for war. The tactical briefing was tense. Price stood at the front, the planet's image rotating behind him. Major Grant distributed data to all present officers. This is Crithis Prime, Price explained. It's their primary breeding facility in this quadrant. Current population estimates range between 3 and 5 billion. 90% are under 10 years old by human standards. Coalition officers shifted uncomfortably. Admiral Threnax spoke first. Children. You're talking about children. I'm talking about future warriors, Price corrected. Every single Crithian on that planet will become a soldier within 5 years. They're being trained right now, conditioned, prepared to continue this war for another 3 centuries. They're still children. Grant pulled up footage from a captured Crithian facility. Young Crithians, small and fast, being taught to kill, being shown Coalition species and trained to hate them, being prepared for war from the moment they could walk. They're weapons, Grant said flatly. Biological weapons being manufactured on an industrial scale. If we leave this planet intact, we'll be fighting these same Crithians in 5 years, and the cycle continues forever. Commander Zelek stood up. You cannot be suggesting what I think you're suggesting. We're suggesting we end this war, Price said. Permanently. That planet represents the Crithians' future. Without it, they can't replace their losses. They can't continue fighting. The war ends, the room erupted. Officers shouted in a dozen languages. Some were outraged. Others were horrified. A few sat in stunned silence, realizing what the humans were really proposing. Vektar raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he looked directly at Price. You want to exterminate an entire planet, including billions of children. I want to end a war that's killed trillions over 3 centuries, Price replied. I want to make sure the Coalition never has to fight the Crithians again. I want to guarantee the safety of every species under your protection. This is how we do that. By becoming genocidal monsters, by doing what's necessary. Price's voice remained calm, cold. Commander, you've seen what we can do. You've watched us dismantle their military. You know, we can win individual battles. But battles don't end wars. You need to break their ability to continue fighting. That planet is that ability. Subcommander Prenu stood up, her voice shaking. I lost my family to the Crithians. My entire world was consumed by the swarm. I have every reason to hate them. But this is wrong. We asked for your help to save lives, not to end them on this scale. Lieutenant Amy Brooks met her eyes. How many Coalition citizens have died in this war? Over 3 centuries? Trillions, Prenu admitted. How many more will die if we leave that planet intact? If we let those billions of Crithians grow up and join the war? I don't know. I do, Brooks said. All of them. Every single Coalition citizen, eventually. The Crithians don't stop. They don't surrender. They don't compromise. They exist to consume and destroy. Leaving that planet alive means accepting that this war continues until either they're extinct or you are. The debate lasted for hours. Some officers argued that there had to be another way. Others said the humans were right, but couldn't bring themselves to support it. A few quietly agreed, but wouldn't say so publicly. Finally, Admiral Threnax asked the question everyone was thinking. If we refuse? If we order you not to attack that planet? Price looked at him steadily. Then we leave. We take our ships and go home. You continue fighting your way. With your rules and your conventions, and in 300 years your descendants will still be fighting the same war. You would abandon us? We would respect your decision. But understand something, Admiral. We came here to help you win. Not to help you feel good about yourselves while you lose slowly. If you don't want our kind of help, that's your choice. But it's the only kind we know how to give. The coalition leadership met in private. They argued for 2 days. In the end, they didn't formally approve the operation. They simply didn't forbid it. A technicality that let them claim moral distance while accepting the results. Captain Jake Morrison led the assault. His fighter wing, supported by 3 battleships including the Vengeance, jumped into the Krithis Prime system. The planet hung in space, green and blue, teeming with life. The Krithians defending it fought desperately. They knew what was coming. Their ships threw themselves at the human fleet with suicidal intensity. It didn't matter. Morrison's pilots were better trained, better equipped, and completely ruthless. Within 4 hours, the orbital defenses were eliminated. The human fleet moved into position above the planet. Price stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking at the world below. Somewhere down there, billions of young Krithians were probably looking up at the sky, wondering what the bright lights were. "Sir," Grant said quietly, "all ships report ready, awaiting your order." Price thought about the children down there, about the fact that they were children. But he also thought about the coalition citizens who would die if those children grew up, about the war that would never end if this breeding facility remained. He had made hard choices before. This was just another one. Execute protocol scorched Earth. The atmospheric processors activated first. They were coalition technology, ironically, designed for terraforming. The humans had modified them. Instead of making air breathable, they made it toxic, deadly. The changes would take 72 hours to complete, but they were irreversible. Then came the biological agents. Human scientists had worked with captured Krithian genetic material. They had designed something specific, something that would only affect Krithian physiology. It was released into the upper atmosphere and would spread across the planet within days. Finally, the orbital bombardment. Not enough to destroy the planet, but enough to eliminate any facility capable of developing a cure or evacuation system. Every spaceport, every research center, every military installation. The operation took 6 hours. When it was done, Krithis Prime was dying. The Krithians on the surface had maybe a week before the atmosphere became completely unbreathable. The biological agents would finish off any who found protection. Coalition observers watched from their ships. Many were crying. Some were praying. A few had refused to watch at all. Price ordered the fleet to withdraw. As they left the system, he could see coalition vessels hanging back, their sensors still focused on the dying planet below. That night, Prenny found Lieutenant Brooks in the mess hall. The human was eating alone, her face expressionless as she reviewed mission reports. "How can you eat?" Prenny demanded. "After what we just did? After killing billions?" Brooks looked up at her. The lieutenant's eyes were tired but not haunted. "Not guilty, just empty. Because I'm hungry," Brooks said simply, "and because those billions would have grown up to kill trillions. I didn't enjoy it. I don't feel good about it, but I don't regret it either. It was necessary, Prenny repeated bitterly. "That's what you say? We just committed genocide and you call it necessary?" "Yes, because it was." Brooks set down her fork. "Sub-Commander, you hate us now." "I understand that. But in 5 years, when those Krithians would have reached fighting age, you would have watched them destroy more coalition worlds. Kill more families like yours." The final Krithian stronghold was a fortress world called Krithax. It had never been conquered, never been successfully attacked. For 300 years, it had stood as the ultimate symbol of swarm power. Now it was the last place they could hide. The siege lasted 72 hours. Every human ship, every coalition vessel that had learned their methods, every weapon they had gathered over 6 months of brutal warfare focused on that single world. Sergeant Vincent Cole led ground teams through the underground tunnels. His soldiers moved like ghosts, clearing rooms and corridors with mechanical efficiency. No hesitation, no mercy. They had done this so many times it was automatic now. Captain Jake Morrison's fighters controlled the skies. Anything that moved, anything that tried to escape was destroyed instantly. The space around Krithax became a graveyard of burning ships. Lieutenant Amy Brooks coordinated orbital strikes from the Vengeance. Every defensive position, every command center, every possible resistance point was targeted and eliminated. She worked for 16 hours straight without rest, her eyes locked on tactical displays. The Krithians fought like they had nothing to lose. Because they didn't. This was their last stand, their final hope. When it fell, their species was finished. On the third day, the central hive collapsed. Cole's teams breached it from below while Morrison's bombers hit it from above. The structure that had stood for centuries crumbled in minutes. The Crithian command structure died in the rubble. By the time the sun set on the third day, Crithax was silent. No more weapons fire, no more resistance. Just smoke and ruins and the bodies of the last Crithian warriors. Colonel Nathan Price walked through the destroyed hive complex. His boots crunched on debris. Around him, human soldiers secured the area, checking for survivors. They found none. The Crithians had fought to the last. Major Lisa Grant joined him in what had been the throne room of the Crithian Empress. The massive chamber was half collapsed. The throne itself, carved from black stone, sat empty and broken. "It's done," Grant said simply. Price nodded. After 6 months, thousands of battles, billions of dead, it was finally over. The Crithian swarm was extinct. The galaxy was safe from them forever. He felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just exhaustion. The victory ceremony took place 1 week later. Every coalition species sent representatives. Hundreds of ships gathered in neutral space. Banners and flags filled the view screens. Music played over communication channels. It should have been joyful, it wasn't. Commander Vectar gave a speech about sacrifice and survival, about how the coalition had prevailed against impossible odds. He thanked Earth for their assistance. He carefully avoided mentioning exactly what that assistance had involved. Price stood with his officers on the stage. They wore their dress uniforms. Medals were presented. Words of gratitude were spoken. The coalition representatives smiled and applauded, but Price could see it in their eyes. Fear, disgust, relief mixed with shame. They were grateful the humans had won their war. They were terrified of what the humans had done to win it. After the ceremony, Vectar approached Price privately. The two of them stood on the observation deck of the coalition flagship, watching Earth's forces prepare to depart. "I want to understand," Vectar said. "How do you live with it? The things you've done, the lives you've taken." Price was quiet for a long moment. "We live with it because we have to, because someone has to be willing to do these things. Someone has to be the monster so others can stay civilized. But at what cost to your own souls? That's not for me to say. Maybe we don't have souls anymore. Maybe we lost them somewhere along the way. But our families are safe. Our world is safe. The people we protect will never have to make the choices we made." Vectar looked at the Earth warships. The Vengeance sat among them, scarred and deadly. "We asked for soldiers. You sent executioners. I understand now why you made that distinction. Do you regret it, asking us to come?" The alien commander thought carefully before answering. "I regret what we became to win. But I don't regret winning. My species will survive because of you. Trillions of beings will live because of what you did. That has to mean something." "It does," Price said. "It means we did our job." 3 days later, the ESS Vengeance broke orbit for the last time. The human fleet formed up and prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. They were going home. Major Grant found Price on the bridge, watching coalition space fade behind them. "Think we'll ever hear from them again?" Price shook his head. "They'll try to forget us. Write us out of their history if they can, or make us into villains in their stories, something to scare their children with. Does that bother you?" "No, we didn't come here for glory or gratitude. We came to eliminate a threat. The threat is gone. That's enough." Morrison approached from the pilot station. "Sir, receiving multiple messages from coalition vessels. They're saying goodbye. Acknowledge them." Politely. As the Vengeance moved away, Brooks appeared on the bridge with a data pad. "Sir, I've compiled the final statistics. Total Crithian casualties estimated at 47 billion. Total infrastructure destroyed, 94% of their industrial capacity. Total human casualties, 237 dead, 812 wounded." Price absorbed the numbers. 47 billion dead, an entire species wiped from existence. Because of him, because of the decisions he had made. "Log it in the mission records," he said, "and seal those files. Nobody needs to know the exact numbers." "Yes, sir." The jump to faster-than-light travel was smooth. One moment they were in coalition space. The next they were in the dark between stars heading home. Cole found Price in the mess hall that evening. The sergeant sat down across from him without asking permission. They had fought together long enough that formality didn't matter anymore. Captain Morrison asked me something earlier, Cole said. Wanted to know if we're heroes or war criminals. What did you tell him? That we're soldiers. We follow orders and complete missions. History can decide the rest. Price smiled slightly. Good answer. Is it true, though? Are we just soldiers? Price looked around the mess hall. His people sat in small groups, eating and talking quietly. They looked tired but not broken. They had done terrible things, but they weren't destroyed by it. They were professionals who had done their job. I don't know, Price admitted. Maybe we're something else. Something the galaxy needed but didn't want to admit needing. We're the people who do what others can't, who make choices others won't. Whether that makes us heroes or monsters probably depends on who's telling the story. Cole nodded slowly. And when we get home? When people ask what we did out here, we tell them we served. We protected Earth's interests. We helped allies in need. The details stay classified, because people don't want to know. Because people shouldn't have to know. Let them sleep safely. Let them believe the galaxy is kinder than it really is. That's what we bought with what we did. The journey home took 3 weeks. During that time, Price thought a lot about what they had accomplished. An entire species extinct, billions dead, methods that would be called war crimes by anyone with a conscience, but also the coalition saved. Trillions of lives protected, a threat eliminated permanently, peace secured for centuries. He wondered which would weigh heavier in the final accounting. Then he realized it didn't matter. The job was done. There was no undoing it. Earth appeared on the view screens, blue and green and beautiful. Home. After 6 months of war, it looked like paradise. General Patricia Hayes met them at the orbital station. She reviewed their reports in silence, her face giving nothing away. Finally, she looked up at Price. The mission was successful? Completely. The Crithian threat no longer exists. And the coalition? They'll survive. They're stronger now, harder. We taught them how to fight total war. Whether that was a gift or a curse, time will tell. Hayes stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth. There are already requests. Other species who heard what you did. They want our help with their problems. Their enemies. Their wars. What did you tell them? That Earth will consider each request carefully. That we don't send forces lightly. That if we do send help, it comes with conditions and consequences. Price understood. Earth had shown the galaxy what humans could do. Now everyone wanted a piece of that power, or feared it. Probably both. Will we answer these requests? Hayes turned back to face him. When necessary. When the threat is real and the need is genuine. Because you were right about one thing, Colonel. Someone has to be willing to do what's necessary. Someone has to be the executioners, Price nodded. He had known this wouldn't be the end. It was just the beginning. Earth had stepped onto the galactic stage and the galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of. When do we deploy again? He asked. Not for a while. You and your people have earned rest. But stay ready. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and now it knows who to call when danger needs to be eliminated. The Vengeance docked at Earth's orbital station. The human soldiers disembarked, returning to families and homes they hadn't seen in months. They would rest, recover, try to return to normal lives. But they would never forget what they had done, what they had become. They were executioners now. Earth's answer to threats that couldn't be reasoned with or contained. Somewhere in coalition space, peace had taken hold.